Second. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me back at UC San Diego. I thought that after Monday attack of the police and the disruption of the encampment, that you might have decided to be silent. But as all historical movements, the repression actually results in further organizing and further mobilization. So congratulating you on the fact that you continue to be steadfast in pushing against this period of repression. I want to first start my talk by recognizing that we are on stolen land. We are on indigenous people's land, and as Palestinian, you can't really speak about settler colonization without actually recognition that the people who lived in here, their history has been silenced. Their own people have been completely put to multiple genocide, and we are still not fully recognizing that history and centering the history. So it's very important for us as we speak about collective liberation. The first and primary arena of liberation is to liberate your mind of structures of knowledge that erases the histories and specificities of people who struggle. The second part is to also recognize our Black brothers and sisters who were brought to this country in the hulls of ships as cargo and struggled for 500 years to break the chains of bondage, and they continue to struggle to uplift and define the moral arc of the American society. And I want to remind people there is a famous painting by the American painter Norman Rockwell, and his painting is the problem we all live with. And if you have not been introduced to the painting, is one of those that is held as a treasure because the painting commemorates the struggle of Ruby Bridges. Does anybody know Ruby Bridges? If you know Ruby Bridges, raise your hand. Okay, so that's good. We have people that know Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges was born September 8, 1954, and in November 14th, 1964, she was the only Black child to enter into elementary school, the William Frantz Elementary School, in the period of desegregation. Why she is important? Because at the time, all the parents, the white parents, pulled their kids out from the school. They did not want to be sitting and taught, their kids to be taught next to this Black kid that was admitted to school. But that's not the problem. Again, racist will always be racist. No teacher in the school wanted to teach Ruby Bridges. We always think that education, right, makes people have open-mindedness and tolerant, all these what you call fuzzy words that we use in diversity, equity, and inclusion training, right? Don't let the commercial actually get you to understand and believe that's the case. So all the teachers refused to teach Ruby except one teacher who actually decided to teach Ruby, Barbara Henry. And every day she teaches her alone in her class while the parents and the community was protesting outside the school, and so much so that the president had to call the National Guard to protect Ruby Bridges coming and going from the school, because some of the parents were actually threatening to poison her. That the instruction from the Secret Service is for only to eat the food that she brings with her from home. Right? Now, why I say this History does not remember any of the teachers that refused to teach Ruby. History only remembers Barbara Henry. History does not remember any of the teachers that refuse. Basically, they're in the dustbin of history. Maybe their kids today are the ones that are protesting for critical race theory not to be taught, because they don't want the history of racism to be taught. No one remembers the names of the parents, right? But Ruby had a whole movie that was made on her behalf, a book by the psychiatrist that was giving her counsel at her time. And we still commemorate Ruby, who's still alive, with the Norman Rockwell painting that is part of America's history. Why this is very important? Because we misread history thinking that the Hollywood version of history is the history that actually unfolded. Right? Now, many of these individuals that are nostalgic about history, they go to Hollywood or possibly you go into their offices and they have these photographs. Now, Jesse Owens, right? We celebrate Jesse Owens, right? He was the fastest human being during the 1936 Olympics. And the United States celebrate Jesse Owens because he showed Nazi Germany and Hitler, who was present in there. But what we don't know is Jesse Owens, as he won his gold medals, he was not invited to the White House to be honored by the president. All the other white Olympians were invited to the White House and celebrated. Now, so many years removed from Jesse Owens, everybody thinks, oh, Jesse Owens, he showed the Nazis. But he was actually subject to a harsher conditions coming back to the United States, not even invited to be recognized by the president. Not only him, Hattie McDaniel was the first African-American woman to win the Oscar, to win an Oscar. She was not allowed to attend Gone with the Wind national premiere. She's in the movie. She was not allowed because she was black. Not allowed to be, after, again, winning an Oscar and being recognized for her talent. 1967, Martin Luther King gives a speech, The Three Evils of Society. And in this speech, he mentions materialism, militarism, and racism. As you notice, or you possibly didn't, these are still living here on campus and are celebrated in between every other occasion. Militarism, materialism, and racism. When Martin Luther King gave his speech, 2/3 of the American public was against Martin Luther King. 1967, again, I Have a Dream speech. What year was that? I Have a Dream. What year? 1963. Again, Martin Luther King wins the Nobel Peace Prize, right? He's celebrated. When he begins to take the critical issue, when he actually speaks on the Vietnam War, when he actually wants to organize a protest to address poverty, and he takes on the trilogy that underpinning American society, 2/3 of the American public did not want to identify with Martin Luther King. New York Times wrote editorial against him. Washington Post wrote editorial against him. Chicago Tribune. Also, the black mainstream press wrote editorials against Martin Luther King. He's making things difficult for us. He's rocking the boat. Why can't we get along, right? Why you are raising these issues? Challenge. Now, why I mention all of these, people who change history are never celebrated when they are in the process of changing history. And you go around to some of the individuals in higher places and lower places. You go to some of these offices in the university and these politicians, and you look at their walls. They might have a Martin Luther King photographs in there, and the dashing ones will have it signed because they got some connection at one point. They bought it from an auction, right? Some might have a Nelson Mandela photograph in there, right? Some also would have went to Africa and bought some trinket to show that they are, culturally aware, right? These are the trapping of implying that they were part of some type of a movement or that they were actually on the right side of history. Most people were on the wrong side of history. Right? They were on the wrong side of history in the civil rights movement. The majority of Americans, even at the time where the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, the majority of Americans were actually against it. The fact that Congress, with Bush and so on, voted for it, Lyndon B. Johnson said as he signed the Civil Rights Act, he lost the South. So that's how the South shifted from Dixie Democrats and became Republican. And it's still the case. That type of regression or attempt to undo the gains of the civil rights movement still with us today. The attacks on the civil rights movement are Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and the Immigration Reform Act. So we're still dealing with people that claim to have made progress, but they're really still beholden to the past. Now you say, what does that have to do with Palestine? It's like you're giving us a lesson in 101 and so on. Part of the debate in California is about critical ethnic studies, right? Teaching of ethnic studies. And one part of teaching ethnic studies is teaching Palestine, as well as teaching ethnic studies from specialists in ethnic studies, not the ADL, right? Not the JCRC, not the American Hindu Foundation, not the right wing, because they would like to have a different ethnic studies where actually you could say slavery was actually great because at least we fed them, right? So they want to reshape the narrative, right, in relations to both ethnic studies and also in relations to Palestine. So I want to jump into our issues relative to Palestine today. I said that first we need to recognize the courage of the students across this country and across the world. And the phenomena of students organizing to change history is nothing new. Don't watch CNN or Fox or The Rabbit or whatever mainstream media. They never had it right. They always were against the political mobilization in the society. All right, you just go back historically. So the fact that the students are in the forefront right now, that is the norm historically. And you go back to the suffrage movement, to the labor rights movement, right? The workers' rights movement in the 1910 to 1920s, the women's suffrage movement. Students were active at that time, and they mobilized. Now, don't think that there is any religious text that says thou shalt work 8 hours a day. It's not there. It's not in the Quran. It's not in the Hadith. It's not in the Bible. It's not in the Torah. It's not in any of the tradition. Thou shalt work 8 hours a day. It was a result of mobilization of people. People organized because before that, you work from can't see in the morning till can't see in the night. And if you happen to die, mashallah, just bury him. And the lucky ones will get a burial place. So political mobilization, political work, organizing students made change and change history. And if we think about the courage of students, every moment in history, students were courageous. I come from Berkeley again, the free speech movement. If you come to Berkeley, And then if you go also to the library, not the library, but the admission Sproul Hall, there is also pictures and photographs of the free speech movement and so on. Right? You would think that the university was so accommodating when the students were protesting to try to get their free speech rights. No, they arrested everyone. All right? Mario Savio went up on the police car in order to actually protest, and people gathered around the car until the police, in essence, let go for a while, but then they arrested them and took them to Santa Rita jail. And for a period of time, the free speech movement activists, organizers were not allowed on campus, even after graduation. Now the universities puts it on all their advertisement. You would think that the chancellor was literally there on the front line in the free speech movement. That's not the case. How many in here have Malcolm X hats, you know, these baseball caps, or a t-shirt? Like we have done with Brother Malcolm, like we commodify him to that 10th degree. At the moment that Malcolm X was alive, he was enemy number one. You would think today that people are having Malcolm X, you go to New York, it's like $75 for a baseball cap. Too bad Brother Malcolm did not copyright his name and his X, right? So again, the courage of the students, the anti-Vietnam War movement, right? Again, Mario Savio, the leader of the free speech movement, was a white progressive person, just to be sure. So the fact that you're white does not mean that you are tolerated because you're politically what you call aligned. If you're not politically aligned, you become enemy number one. Right? Which is also for us to understand when we think about organizing, definitely they want to disrupt relationship across racial lines in a progressive way, especially if we think about Fred Hampton and the killing, the assassination of Fred Hampton in Chicago. One of his threat is that he was able to build relationship with some of the marginalized whites within the society. So it became a greater threat. So students' courage always made the difference in the free speech movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and most importantly, in the anti-apartheid movement. Right? Anti-apartheid movement would not have been where it was without the students. That's why when Nelson Mandela was released from jail, it was not the chancellor that actually caused the jail to be opened. It was the students' movement that opened the jail doors of Nelson Mandela. The chancellor called the police on the student encampments. The police arrested hundreds of students across the country. In Berkeley, hundreds were arrested. And long and behold, when Nelson Mandela came, they all wanted to give him the key to the campus and take picture next to him. The same people who were arresting the students for protesting and challenging apartheid are the same people that are, you know, opportunists. Want to take the picture because they want to look nice and show it possibly 10 years thereafter to their kids. I was part of the movement. Which movement were you part of? All right. So again, the courage of the students and challenging the status quo was made a difference. In the anti-apartheid movement, the university acted with the national framing of constructive engagement with South Africa. And let me break down constructive engagement. Don't disrupt the relationship because we need to build for peace with South Africans. Because if we cut and have sanctions and divest, it might actually disrupt, and the South African apartheid might become a little bit more harsher because isolating them that prevents us from having conversation with them. And look, in South Africa, some of the companies are hiring blacks. The blacks will be impacted if we actually had sanctions and divest from South Africa. That's their language. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we get a few of you here in America to visit South Africa? We will actually, the South African civil society, people who are of importance will host you in there, and you'll go and visit, and we'll invite you to talk to some blacks who would actually tell you don't actually engage in divestment, in sanctions, in cultural boycott of South Africa. Actually, no, we'll actually be better. We're going to invite some blacks to come in here to actually tour the United States. Now, you need to know, during that time, there was a number of blacks that were working with apartheid South Africa. Chief Botolezi was actually engaged with South Africa. And similar to the Palestinians, we have our own Botolezis, right, which we call Palestinian Authority. They're paid for, and as such, they bring them to tour. Recently, there is a whole bunch of tours, not only from PA, but also from Arabs in 1948, to say it's actually, no, we're actually having a great time in Israel. In fact, we don't leave our houses, that's okay. We need to deal with this idea. So the university was engaged in constructive engagement. And that was the policy of the United States government, constructive engagement. While the students were engaged in calling for boycott, divestment, sanction, cultural boycott, and they were on the right side of history. So what I want you to actually, as we think of history, think of the history of the movement and what the movement was about. Yes, people got arrested. Yes, they engaged in civil disobedience. Yes, they called for boycott. Yes, they went to the chancellor and sat in chancellor offices. They took over buildings and sat in academic buildings. They went to the regent's meeting and they disrupted and protested regent meetings. They went into congressional offices. That's what political mobilization is about. Now, I know these days people tell you, why don't you actually be nice in protesting? Right? It's like, just like be nice. Why you're just, ask politely. Why you're disrupting the normal patterns? Just come to the office. We could talk about it. Well, we've been talking for the past 75 years. People have been actually appealing to for the past 75 years, and actually 75 plus, because again, from not 48, but we could actually go to 1917. And what happened throughout this period is the university continued to increase its engagement. Almost every university have an engagement with Israel, whether it's an academic exchange program, student exchange program, faculty exchange program, research program, all that has been increased without a question asked about the Palestinians. All right? So in essence, the university have intentionally engaged in constructive engagement. They call it building for peace, right? Dialogue. All these are the new framing for the same pattern of not challenging the status quo in relations to Palestine. Now, why are the students mobilizing? We're mobilizing because we're witnessing genocide. Can everybody say the word genocide? What are we doing? Organizing for genocide. This is the first time we have actually a live stream genocide, the most documented genocide in human history. You don't need to go, right, to try to get into the archives. You don't need to go and look at whether it happened. We have a live stream genocide. We know the names of the individuals, right? Just today, they found a 5th mass grave in a Shifa hospital today, right? So genocide is unfolding in front of our eyes. It's on Instagram, it's on TikTok, it's on Facebook, it's on WhatsApp, it's on Signal. Even those who are trying to not to cover it, CNN, right? They still have to actually contend that there is actually people that are being killed. And it's literally being streamed. Do you remember Biden, when he began to actually maybe, APAC or somebody sent him a talking point? We can't actually take the ministry, Gaza Ministry of Health data to be accurately. And they inserted the ministry to indicate that it is illegitimate. And what happened? He had to walk back this because every legitimate organization internationally depended on the data and said their data is actually verifiable. The United Nations said it's verifiable. The European Union said it's verifiable. Right? They tried to cast it out because that's trying to hide the evidence. Because if you cast doubt on the agency that actually document the data, then you could say it did not happen. If a tree falls in the forest and it's not what you call seen, recorded, or it's not on TikTok, did it really fall? If a genocide is not actually recorded, it's not actually accepted, then you could actually have the plausible deniability. That's what Biden was trying to do. It did not work. Why? Because people are witnessing in front of their eyes the genocide unfolding minute by minute, second by second. You know that we had 146 journalists that have been killed in Gaza. Here's the kicker for you. Throughout World War II and all of the Vietnam War, we did not have the same number of journalists killed in these two wars. Wars that lasted almost 20 years between both of them, we did not have the number of journalists. And then you have the audacity of journalists to go and attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Not a word uttered about Palestinian journalists. Not a word said. Again, trying to hide the evidence, casting doubt on the Gaza Ministry of Health data, trying to avoid content with a live stream genocide. So we need to make sure, as we organize, don't allow it to make you forget that we're dealing with genocide. If they don't like the word, let them go to Dr. Phil for therapy. We should not be therapists to people who are in denial. Denial of genocide. Not only that, but denial with the Nakba. There's a straight line. You deny the Nakba and you deny the genocide today. You deny the massacres. 110 massacres in 1948. Not only Deir Yassin, but other massacres. So we're dealing with a willful denial and a willful attempt to hide and conceal the fact that we're dealing with genocide. So we need to emphasize that the students are mobilized because they're witnessing genocide. I need to get a sip of water because I need to get a little bit to Nancy Pelosi. Does anybody know Nancy Pelosi? All right. She was the Speaker of the House when it was in the hands of the Democrats. When this whole thing unfolded, Nancy Pelosi said that we are being instructed by Russia. Putin, I'm busy right now. Talk to me later. She accused us of mobilizing because Putin was calling us on the phone. All right? That's an attempt to try to conceal the fact that it's genocide. In another time, she actually called Code Pink activists, go back to China. Now, she could not listen that when she used Russia, but the fact that she tells a person go to China, again, she does not recognize that's anti-Asian racism. There's nothing wrong with China, right? Possibly, you know, she was not up and her latte was not yet as hot as it should be. So literally, she said that to go back to China. Again, to try to conceal and use diversion from what is taking place. A third charge on the students and the movement that George Soros is basically behind all of this. Now, if you know, George Soros is a Jewish philanthropist. Now, tell me, accusing a Jewish philanthropist of being behind the movement does not sound to be anti-Semitic? And people who actually are speaking about anti-Semitism yet say that it is George Soros behind all these movements. I put on Twitter, I said, anybody had George Soros contact? Because I need 100 million because I have a lot of different projects that needs funding. Meaning they're attempting to use all these frames in order to actually not confront the reality that people who are of conscious witnessing a genocide are mobilizing for it. And the fact on the other side, meaning Israel, is you have Netanyahu as your salesperson. Netanyahu is the person that is basically bombastic. You have all of his government that actually are calling for genocide. So on the one hand, you have literally people that are calling for genocide specifically and intentionally. On the other, you have a student movement that basically are there, and they're trying to find who's behind it. I went and tried to get one of those Harry Potter wands. It didn't work. I believe they said, maybe I could get a wand and say, whoop, everybody gets mobilized for Palestine all over the place. It didn't work. So again, they're trying an attempt to defame the movement that is witnessing what is taking place, and people are mobilizing from across the spectrum, and in particular, a large segment of Jewish activists, right, that tend to be also what you call removed. So in many campuses, actually, literally you have a majority sometime in some of the campuses where there isn't large Arab, Palestinian, or pro-Palestine Muslim community, you actually have a large segment of the Jewish activists that are there. But it tends to be, again, erased, because for those who are committed to Israel, they are deemed to be self-hating Jews. Because the framing is that if you're Jewish, you have to be for Israel. If you're not, then you must be the wrong type of Jewish person. So reducing Jewishness in relations to supporting Zionism, supporting Israel, and essence being silent in relations to genocide. So Nancy Pelosi attempt to defame, to divert, as well as the national discourse, is because there has been success, tremendous success that has taken place across the campuses, and now is international, right? All across Europe, in various parts in Asia, in Latin America, right? The movement has taken hold, and I would say that the movement is irreversible, meaning that the change in campus public opinion that have occurred for the past 7 months is irreversible. And we already have evidence for this, all right? Bernard College in Colombia, the students had actually a ballot measure that they voted on for divestment. It's different than the student government. They actually had a general vote. The ballot measure passed 91% in favor of divestment. This is Bernard College in Columbia University. Meaning, CNN and some of those people say there's only a few people that are active in there. Again, sometimes not everybody goes and sleep in the tent, right? You cannot assess the breadth of the movement and the depth by only pointing out that there's only 200 in on sleeping in the tents or mobilizing. So Bernard College, the vote was 91% in favor of divestment. Another vote at Stanford University, likewise a ballot measure. The undergraduate students voted on a divestment measure. It passed 72% in Stanford University. The graduate students voted 74% in favor of divestment. Again, this is a ballot measure, meaning all the students participate to vote. So you no longer can cast, this is a small, what you call troublemaker influence. Again, maybe George Soros are paying them, or Putin, right, is calling them to mobilize, or some come from China, right? All these framing is really cannot be substantiated, which again, we know what is occurring. There's a mass mobilization because people have witnessed what is taking place. Why is this taking place is also very important. Political mobilization and political consciousness is cumulative. I tend to believe that the Palestine movement is an outcome, what we're seeing today is an outcome of a 30-year accumulative experience. Dating back to the anti-apartheid movement, the Central American Solidarity Movement, the mobilization against the Iraq War in 1991, and those movements began to actually put some engagement relative to Palestine in segments of the progressive movement. In the anti-apartheid movement, the Palestinians were with the ANC and the side of the boycott, divestment, and sanction. That's why when Nelson Mandela came out of jail, he thanked the PLO, he thanks the Palestinians, and when Ted Koppel in New York, in an interview, tried to ask him why you actually are friends with Yasser Arafat, Nelson Mandela said, you don't tell us who are our friends. Palestinians were actually at the side of the ANC, provided the training for the ANC in Mozambique, provided training for the ANC in Algeria and in Lebanon. While Israel was actually sending weapons to apartheid South Africa, built the fence between Mozambique and South Africa, and also was targeting South African activists here in the United States. If you want the data or the information, I have the research on it from 1992. The ADL was responsible for spying on the progressive movement and dealing and sending that information to the South Africa apartheid to target South African activists in the United States. They also did the same with the Irish activists who were living in San Francisco, the H block prisoners who escaped. So again, if you want, I have the whole file and you're welcome to actually look at it. So again, this is a cumulative in terms of political, Palestine political mobilization. And it accelerated throughout. And I would point that to the moment of Ferguson protests here in the United States was very critical, because the Black Lives Matter movement connected with the Palestinians. Literally at the time of the Ferguson protest, Palestinians were texting their black brothers and sisters in here, telling them how to deal with tear gas, because the same companies that were using the tear gas in Ferguson were the same companies that were supplying the Israeli army. More importantly, it turned out that our police force in Ferguson was being trained by the Israeli, being sent to Israel for training. So that also connected the Black Lives Matter, and delegations actually went to Palestine to visit, including Mark Lamont Hill and others at the time, as a direct outcome of the protest movement in Ferguson, accelerate to Trump and the arrival of Trump. The women's movement, likewise, even though it was attacked because of Linda Sarsour being Palestinian, it actually again increased and put Palestine in the discourse in the society, and then moved to George Floyd, which likewise is a movement that mobilized people to begin thinking in decolonial terms and demand a different type of understanding politically and epistemologically. So while this movement today, we're seeing its result, it's a 30-year in the making. And a 30-year in the making of actually building consciousness, links, relations, connections for us to see this result. And that also why we understand the type of repression that is being faced at this particular time, which gets me into both complicity and silence. Universities have been silent. University leadership have been silent. Now, do you know that 11 Palestinian universities in Gaza were completely wiped out? We're not talking about a bomb thrown at one building. We're talking about literally having explosives being put out throughout the building and the whole buildings being detonated as an organized demolition by the Israeli military force. 11 universities. Yet till today, only one US university president have said a word about Palestinian universities. Right? Because we tell them we want academic and cultural boycott. Say, no, 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 we can't, because we need to have open academic exchange. MashaAllah, you found that word, open academic exchange. Where is the academic exchange with 11 universities completely being wiped out? Professors being killed. 2 presidents of a university wiped out with all of their families. All right? So again, total silence. And then they send you all these statements that express empathy with the Israelis, but no empathy with the Palestinians. I want to see which AI program they use to send out literally this language of nonsense masquerading as concern. Right? Have you noticed like the amount of email that they send you? Say, MashaAllah, they're like diversity, equity, and exclusion, not inclusion. Right? Where is the empathy? And they always have to put framing October 7th, but nothing beyond. 40,000 Palestinians killed, not a word in any of these. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not a word. How about the 8,000 Palestinian rotten prisoners? 3,800 arrested since October 7th. Where is your empathy? Or they don't exist because they happen to be Palestinian. Wrong skin, wrong race, possibly wrong religion, but they don't recognize that some Palestinians are Christian. Oops, we didn't know that. Total silence. Have you noticed that all of the academic professional associations had said nothing on what took place? They're so good at researching what you call genocides of the past. They're quick to try to see what the birds in the redwoods are talking about. They're so skilled at trying to discover and collect the bones of dead people, but utterly silenced today in a genocide that is unfolding. And especially there's a group of people, these are the what you call extra special, they work on decolonization. Not a word from this professional class. Not a word from the people who are supposed to actually speak, read, and discuss decolonization. Silence. Now, silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. Because they're not recognizing, again, what is taking place, and they're getting their marching order from the ADL, from Israeli consulate, academic liaison, AIPAC. All of these basically are getting completely not to give recognition and to be silent, in essence, to be complicit, and continue to defend academic relations with Israeli institutions while Palestinian institutions have been completely wiped out in Gaza. So silence and complicity is what we are dealing with, and we need to challenge the silence and complicity in our academic institutions and in fields of study that literally are completely obfuscating what is taking place. And again, we could look at people that literally have written on all kinds of issues and literally nowhere to be found. And they hide behind, well, it's complicated. Oh, it's complex. We can't really, we need to have nuance. Like, you know, nuclear physics is complex. Fuzzy math is fuzzy and difficult. But there's nothing difficult or complex in a genocide that is literally being witnessed and live streamed in there. The word complex and difficult is a way, again, not to address the issues at hand. Now, I saw some of the protesters being pulled from their hair, especially women. Have you saw those? Did you see those images? Did you see them? Yeah, right? Did you see the even like the batons being used on women? Have you heard anything from the women organizations on this? Have the National Organization of Women said anything? The Fund for the Feminist Majority, did they say anything? Did the CNN come and interview the woman that her hair was pulled by the police? Did they frame this as violence against women? Did any rally say we're going to cut our hair in solidarity with women? Did they do that? No. Well, how about the 15,000 Palestinian mothers that have been killed and injured in Gaza? Is there any mobilization by those who never leave an opportunity to try to rescue a Muslim woman as long as she does not speak? Where are they? Total silence. Right? Nowhere to be found. Don't allow anyone from now on to come and tell you and lecture you about human rights of women anywhere in the world. Doesn't mean that human rights are better in other places, but if you want to have the standard of speaking on human rights, then actually be consistent. If you want to speak about the rights of women in one Muslim country, then I want you to speak about women's rights in Palestine, first and foremost, but also to speak about the repression that is taking place in the pro-Palestine movement today. If you don't, then please go and eat some falafel and hummus and discourse on diversity in that arena. That's as far as your sophistication goes. We just have to be very clear that the moment of this obfuscation, the moment of trying to have a double standard is not there. Silence and complicity is there by our institutions. I want you to also to go to human rights centers. Many of our universities, including mine, have a human rights centers. They have not said a word on what takes place in Gaza now. They have not put a statement for the past 7 months on Gaza. These are human rights centers. And complete silence and complicity, because if you don't say about it anything, then you are consenting to what is taking place. All right? So again, human rights establishment have completely been silent and in essence justifying and continue to be complicit in what is occurring as we speak. This includes the structured violence that is taking place. We all witnessed Columbia University, the police violence. You saw it at UCLA, the violence of the police, but the night before, the violence of the thugs where the police was actually sitting and watching. The violence at USC against the student, as well as the silencing of our sister Tabassum. Violence in Emory University that also dragged a faculty member, a professor, full professor, with the police and utter silence. The violence in Chicago University, the violence in University of Austin, Washington University. Right? So now we're being framed as being violent, while actually we are subject to structural violence. And this has a reason for it. Many of us was nostalgically thought that, especially from among the immigrant community, that, you know, we made it, we got our position, we became doctors, engineers, we got our IT jobs, we're Googling ourselves to the bank, all these framing, and we thought that, you know, the society is gonna be accepting us because we're a different class configuration. Let me tell you, the more you're melanin endowed, the more violence is structural against you. And the police, who often, most of the police departments nationally as well as on campuses have gotten their training, especially going to Israel to get training with the ADL police exchange programs. Is also post 9/11, what we have Urban Shield, where police departments with intelligence services from Israel and other countries trained together. So when they are looking at the students' movement, immediately they are looking at this is a violent threat. And the media has been amplifying this, and as such, making those who are for peace and those for trying to stop genocide are being claimed to be the violent ones, while those who are promoting war and sending weapons to Israel are framed to be pro-peace. This is like the flipping of the script in order to demonize, to justify what is taking place. So we need to be very clear in terms of the student movement and what is occurring, that we need to stop the universities, the police departments from continuing to frame the student movement and the activists to be actually framed as the ones that are guilty, and those who are urging them to use violence against us, these are the ones that needs to be taken to task. And I think that as we move forward, we need to file as many lawsuits as possible against these universities. Every student should actually who have been impacted, any students who've been pepper sprayed, any student that has been hit with a baton, you actually have the right to file a civil rights claim and to actually file a lawsuit against the university. The university can ticket you for what you call putting a tent. Again, civil disobedience is part of political mobilization. You have the right to free speech. You have a right to protest. The university has what you call to give you a ticket for the fact that you are in a tent. Again, we accept that. You could check with the National Lawyers Guild. You have CARE, you have Muslim Legal Fund of America, Palestine Legal, and so on. But the university and the police does not have the right to beat you. That's a civil rights violation. They don't have the right to actually have tear gas you. That's a civil rights violation. They do not have the right to actually shoot rubber bullets at you. That's a civil rights violation. And for sure, allowing thugs to attack you in the middle of the night while they're watching, that's a civil rights violation. And that's what we need to take them and challenge them. And many of those who are in the administration that are responding to criminalizing the movement, they need to actually answer for those questions and answer for why they did what they did. I would actually assume that they had emails, they corresponded, they had communication, and all this will be subject to FOIA, subject Freedom of Information request. They'll be subject to discovery. And if they were responsible for allowing any type of repression to take place, whether they communicated with the ADL or the Israeli consulate to do so, they should be held responsible because they took their oath in this country to defend the Constitution and not to be spokesperson or a repressive arm for Netanyahu or his thugs at the universities. That's what you need to do, and that's what we need to actually counter with to make sure that they will be taken into account and to be able to challenge their repression that is structurally taking place across the universities. Now, a last group that I want to, critique. Have you heard anything from the cancel culture people? Right? Like people, oh, we should allow people to speak. MashaAllah, I will reserve for you a room. Where are you? You're against cancel culture, but you're for canceling Palestinian voices. You want to cancel and shut down SJP. You want to cancel and shut down Jewish Voice for Peace. You want to shut down and cancel faculty that are supporting students and speaking Palestine. So it seems that you're not really a universalist in free speech. It's only the speech that you agree with, it's allowed, and you could claim cancel culture. The speech that challenges U.S. policy, you actually want to restrict and limit. So we need to actually challenge those cancel culture words. And I would add to it also, for just tangential element, is there a lot of discourse also among Muslims that, especially to have a discourse of adab and appropriateness, whether you could protest or not, and what type of religious discourses need to take place. Again, this is another form of trying to mandate a silencing as well as a cancel culture for political activism and organizing. A call for justice is a universal call, and what we're witnessing is a universal call for justice that is transnational, that across the world, and we cannot use religious discourse or a silencing tactic or a cancel tactic in order for us to limit the scope of what is taking place. I do believe that Palestine will be free. I do believe that in our time we'll see a free Palestine. I do believe that the movement that we are seeing is irreversible. I do believe that the International Court of Justice will reach a determination that genocide is there, even though they are being threatened. Those who are threatening the International Court of Justice are on the take from the ADL. They collectively have received close to $6 million plus from the AIPAC. But I do believe that you cannot lock or change the overwhelming consciousness that have developed. We should take comfort that South Africa was the last settler colonial project to be ended in Africa. And I do believe that Palestine will be the last settler colonial project to be ended in Asia. It is within our lifetime that this actually will take place. And the fact that we have a free Palestine, our epistemology, our worldview, sees it possible for our Jewish brothers and sisters that are with us to be part of a free Palestine. We will not accept Zionism, Israel settler colonialism to define our relationship, our history with the Jewish community, whether historically or today. We are not the one that have committed pogroms against Jews. History of Muslim, Arab, Christian relations in the East with Jewish population is not European history, is not the Balfour history, it's not the French history, it's not the German history. Zionism was born in Europe because Europe is racist, was racist, continue to be racist, and have not recovered from its racism. So our fight for a free Palestine is a fight against racism, against Islamophobia, against anti-Semitism as it has been articulated, and not according to ABL, Netanyahu, Biden, European racism, or anything of that history. So our change is a change of a different future, a different world. What Fanon said, end of colonialism, a dying colonialism. What we're seeing today is a dying colonialism. It died in South Africa, and it will die in Palestine to born a free Palestine and a free society, and that's what we're all about. And if you happen about to have $10 million, we have a lot of projects, right? In terms of we're appealing for people, make sure to continue to fund and support the activism that is taking place. It's not the funding, but the resources are needed. And I know that in here you have many legal cases that are needed. So continue to support each other. Our collective strength will make a change. It's not individuals, but collectivity will make a change. And your theme was collective liberation. May our collective liberation be actualized. If you think of it, you could actualize it. Go forth and think about liberation. Think about actualizing free Palestine, because it's in your lifetime that will happen. Thank you.